So, Beardy, I know that you're very keen on what's happening in the care home sector. So it's not many years for you now, but these things are obviously important.
Cheeky
but
monkey.
you'll be relieved, unless you've been on the planet Zog, to know that our Prime Minister of, I think it's his second week actually, our Prime Minister has shown a healthy interest in the care sector, not just care homes, but the whole care sector, and has, to quote, been prepared or is prepared to use up a lot of political capital,
right,
end quote, solving this, which I think means he's going to take quite a lot of risk and put his shoulder behind it. I mean, I guess the gist of his points, I think it was yesterday he was speaking, the gist of it is that he thinks that our care sector is on its knees and we are failing the British people. He said it's a bit of a lottery and even worse than the US health insurance or the health sector, which is quite an interesting comparison. And his vision is to create a care sector that is free at the point of use, as is the NHS, by, he didn't actually put a date on it, but let's just say within his 10-year plan, I guess. And it all sounds very grand. And if I always often do, if I go back to my 2-week stay in hospital, I saw it for myself that one of the reasons our hospitals are so busy is because people who could be discharged if they had care can't be because they don't have care. So that's one aspect of it. So, it's all good, and free at the point of use probably isn't entirely what he means, because there are nuances on that. And I know that you've done some research on this. But for example, some countries insist that there is a contribution of one sort or another from the residents. And I can give you a very personal Scandinavian example. My father-in-law, God rest his soul, spent his last 2 or 3 years in a care home, and his pension went towards provision of his care. That contributed to the physical care and his meals. And that was accepted, and nobody expected anything different. And there are all sorts of models all over the world that are degrees better or worse than that. The one that's probably most similar to where we almost went is the one in Australia, where I think the maximum any individual would pay for care if they had the resources is $80,000. That's quite close to the proposal that Boris initially put before the country a few years ago. But, there are all sorts of different models. But one thing is for sure, it will cost some public money. And the latest figure that I saw was 18.6 billion per annum, I suppose that is. Yeah. On the basis that the resident contributes to some of the care and some of the food costs. So it's not completely free at the point of use. I mean, that's a summary, but this is what Burnham wants. He did say yesterday, and then I'll see if my summary squares with yours. He did say yesterday that how we are going to pay for it and how it might impact taxation is in the mix, and he'll come back to us later on that. That's one interpretation of where we are. Anything to add?
No, I think your figure, it's interesting because the figure that I'd been working on that I'd seen was 18.5 billion. And exactly the same. I've seen figures bouncing around of 8.5 billion over the last few days, which I think is incredibly small in comparison.
Very small, very small.
The 18.5, and you're right, and I can't remember what the report was, but there were two figures in terms of the cap that they were looking to put on it, and Boris's was 80,000.
Yes.
And there was also a figure of 35,000 at one point as well, which was much lower.
Right.
But they were talking about the benefit of that, of course, is that once you've paid that money, that's it. So if you happen to live for another 30 years, you've made your contribution and you no longer have to make. Whereas if you're paying a percentage, then you're forever paying out. And if you live 20 years, you might well deplete anything that you had in terms of savings or your house or anything along those lines, even on the proposals that Burnham seems to be putting forward. It is, as you say, the care element that he's talking about free at the point of use, whereas the meals and accommodation would be the bit that you'd have to make, either have to pay in full, which is about half of the cost, or depending on this sliding scale as to whether they cover some of that or otherwise. Interesting, the Denmark issue, I did a little bit of research in that as well. They've got what they call and I think it's a demeaning term, but they've got what they call pocket money, which is a minimum that residents, and in this country, residents have to be left with to be able to spend at their discretion on a weekly basis. So that's money that they can use for whatever they want, whether they want to go out, to go to the cinema, assuming they're mobile, or whether they want to buy in food or that type of thing. The figure in this country is £20 per week that they have to be left with out of their pension, whether that be a state pension or whether that be an occupational pension or what have you. The figure in Denmark is £200 a week, 10 times as much.
Wow, they must be going out a lot in Denmark.
Well, I think the thing is, I mean, Denmark, as we've discussed, is more expensive in terms of what you can afford to do with £200 a week. Yeah. But I think there's more of a dignity issue with regard to. But anyway, that's a smaller issue. But the bigger issue here is how you would fund this. And I think we also had this discussion about, Bernard's been talking about how he's not happy with the way some of it is costed from the private sector getting involved with care homes, is he? I think you've looked at that to a degree.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's not said this, so we should say this quite, to be fair. But it's reported that he's not happy that if this massive change in care takes place and obviously increased government spending, he's not happy that an element of it will go towards private providers making super profits because they can.
Yeah.
Now, in the article I read, it was a Times article, to give it its creds, they cited a couple of private equity firms, I won't name them, there's no point, never heard of them, who have a goodly number of homes. One's 280, one's 260, one's owned by a US Dubai organization, another one's owned by a US company. That's a lot of care homes. So what he's arguing is, obviously, a certain percentage of the fees that would be paid to these organizations would end up in the hands of private equity or big bonuses and all that. Yeah. And that may well be the case. But my concern is that there are about 18,000 care homes in the UK. 85% of them are run for profit. That's up from 78%. So in other words, the private sector is definitely filling the demand here. And I know from some of the businesses that I'm involved in, I know that there are demands from the owners of these businesses, whether they have one care home, 2, 3, 4, to improve the homes and to increase capacity because they borrow money, and that's quite healthy. That's, helping the economy to tick over. And I just think Mr. Burnham needs to be crystal clear what he means, because there's no way the state can overnight replace those 18,000 care homes that are run privately. We just wouldn't have the capital to buy them out. And my concern is that if he suddenly starts a debate that causes some confusion about the future, these care home owners will stop investing, stop improving, stop acquiring the next home. And actually, in the short term, the standard of care will fall because the supply will fall. Now, as regards private equity, I can see there could be an argument to limit excess profits there. That wouldn't seem unreasonable if government is going to plough more money in. But that's a different thing to a company that's just running maybe 3 or 4 cabs, for example. So that was my point, really, that governments have to be careful what they say. Now, he hasn't said any of this, but the rumour is bubbling around.
No, and it could lead. I mean, the media are suggesting, and they're quite right, I think, as you've suggested there, that it could lead to a collapse if these companies pull out too quickly and decide they're going to be put under so much undue pressure, and there are listed companies that collapse in their share price and all sorts of problems. So I appreciate what you're saying. I think where he's coming from, and I think that this is the problem that they're going to have to deal with, is that there are 5%. Not very many, but there used to be a lot. It used to be a much larger percentage of care homes in this country that are still under public ownership. And the amount on average that local councils are paying per week for residents to stay. Because perhaps I haven't put this into context. There are 2 different categories of residents in care homes. There are those people who haven't got any money to be able to afford to pay any of their fees, and that's all then paid for by the local authority.
Yeah.
And then there are those who have resources that can be used towards paying for all of the fees. So that's medical and accommodation and meals. So if you've got a savings, or if you've got investments, or for that matter, if you've got a house that you're not using and you're on your own, then they will sell that to be able to pay the fees.
And that's a low threshold, isn't it? It's about 23,000, isn't it?
23,500, exactly. So it's not a lot to be able to pass on to if
you've got to your 60s, 70s, 80s, and you haven't got that.
Yeah,
it's probably quite unusual, I would think.
So those people who are staying in care homes who are being funded by the local authority in total, their costs are roughly £950 a week.
Okay,
is how much they're paying.
Okay.
If you're paying privately, and by privately we mean if you're having to sell your house or to go and stay, the costs start at about £1,300 a week. So there's a huge gap between what you can buy if you're a local authority on the market and what you can buy if you're an individual who's being. So I think what his argument is, and these are the people that are being hurt at the moment, I think his argument is those people who are having to buy accommodate, the whole lot privately, are being fleeced by these big care home providers in that they're charged. There's a different scale to what they're charging local authorities for.
But what about
publicly funded people?
But they're not, the 18,000 care homes are not all in these big conglomerates, are they? So if I've got one or two care homes and I'm earning the £1,300 a week or charging I'm not a big corporate animal, am I? I'm just running a business.
No, and I'm not really. There's two track, isn't there? There's two different fees being charged. I'm not suggesting that the small care homes will do exactly the same as the larger ones. They set the standard, don't they, at the end of the day? So if you can charge, from what I understand, you can effectively charge whatever you want.
Right.
Private individual you can set your own fees.
Yeah. Whereas local authority will only pay a certain amount, presumably. Yeah.
But if you're then in a position where you don't have a choice as to, you can't, most of these care homes will be looking to maximize the revenue that they get for selling their rooms, won't they? So they're going to push the price up. That's where it gets a bit difficult, because I think not only are they the private individuals are having to pay a lot more than those who are funded by the state, but they're also at the mercy of whatever they want to charge. There's no caps. There's no, I think that's where he's looking at in terms of bringing the costs down, because they're the people that they're looking at the moment, are the ones who are having to fund their own care and accommodation and food. So how you go about that, I don't know. Do you bring in a cap on how much you can charge? Is that one way around it?
It's one way around it. Whether that has to be regionalised, because you have to imagine that capital costs will be more expensive in, say, the southeast than they would in the northwest, for example. That would be but I'm sure that clever people could work this out: cost of capital, cost of property, and that sort of stuff. That's one way around it. The other break you can put on it is what Boris was thinking about, and what the Aussies do is have a maximum that isn't too small as to really not cover it, but maximum, let's bring it up to date and call it $100,000 a year. You won't have to spend more than $100,000 a year.
But I guess he's looking on the other side of that, isn't he? Because he's looking at how much it's going to cost the state to keep people in these care homes. So he's trying to bring the costs down so that when it's a liability for the taxpayer.
Yes, I understand that. But you can look at both, because both sides are in the argument, aren't they? How much you should have to provide. So if it's not a cap, I don't know what it is, because I don't know. I think you have a rate card, don't you? As you do in other businesses. This is how much we're prepared to pay. If you want to take part in this new world, this is what you've got to sign up to.
Yeah. So that is effectively a cap, isn't it?
It is, but it can work. Yeah. It can work if it's not unreasonably low, because if it's unreasonably low, providers will withdraw because they can't get return on investment.
Yeah.
So I think, but the other interesting thing is, all that being said, he still needs to spend, let's call it for now, £18 billion more per annum, and how that's going to be funded. Last week, I think we talked about this idea that it would be a 10% inheritance levy on all estates. Personally, I think that makes a lot of sense, because then everyone, when they get their pays, and happens quite quickly, because the problem is a lot of countries have created what I would call sinking funds and started this 30, 40, 50 years ago. I think it was Japan did, where when you get to 30 years old, they apply a ring fence levy on your wages, 1.5%, something like that. And obviously over time that builds up money, but we haven't got that time. We need it now. So a levy on estates would probably be a good move, I would have thought. 10% is reasonable, isn't it? It's not unreasonable, is it?
I lean towards the other way of raising it. I think we ought to be looking. I mean, we had the cuts that we had in the last years of the Conservative government on national insurance. They equated to what would be 20 billion now. And now he's boxed himself into a corner, saying he's going to stick to the manifesto pledges of not increasing tax and national insurance. But that, to me, would be the easiest way to do it, would be to take that national insurance. We couldn't have we didn't really have that money to afford those silly cuts at the time. And now we're in this position where we need that money back. That, to me, would be the way to go. But, we'll have to agree to disagree on that.
Well, I mean, I think I'm just saying the simplest way of doing it, if the maths work, and I haven't done the maths, but if he's kicked the figure of 10% around, I presume he has, I see that as quite straightforward, and it's a reasonable sell to me.
But it's not progressive, is it? It doesn't mean, it means a huge tax cut for those people who've got huge estates. And it means that it's going to bring in those people at the moment who've got a £325,000. They don't pay anything in terms of inheritance tax under £325,000. They will have to start paying. So it's hitting the poor discommensurately to the rich.
Well, it depends what you think about taxation. I think surely 10% works across all estates.
Yeah, but the rich will pay 40% on higher estates. They wouldn't they'd only pay 10% across their estate.
I'd be amazed if he abolished inheritance tax.
No, that's the deal. That's the deal, abolishing inheritance tax.
Well, there's been no deal, have there? There's nothing on the table.
No, but that's the proposal. But yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, that's the difference. Well, I'd be amazed if he did that. But anyway, the last thing I wanted to say on this, because we've gone over time a little bit, is that I think you'll be happy, because I know that you like taking part in national conversations. And Baroness Casey, who's leading yet another review, 22 of them we've had, by the way, a review into this, she's excited to invite a million people to take part in a national conversation. So I've put your name forward, and I did say to her, there's no one I can think of who'd be better at having a conversation with them.
Let me just agree with you here, because this is a long grass exercise again, isn't it? I mean, I don't know why he's brought it up if he's just going to kick it into the long grass. I just think it's ridiculous. We've got all the proposals. We know what needs to be done. Just get on and do it.
Absolutely. He has brought the review forward a year, but that's still 2027. Anyway, I would normally say we'll return to this, but I don't think we can wait a year. Come on, Andy, get on with it.